Welcome. Well, you are at home with Jim and Joy, and you are an important part of our EWTN family. And we hope and pray that you are having a holy, blessed Lent. You are an important part of our EWTN family, and we are delighted that you've welcomed us into your home. We would love to hear from you, so send us an email with your question or your comment to jimandjoy@ewtn.com. And today's show, we're going to be covering sensitive topics that may not be suitable for children, so parents and guardians, please be advised. And we are thrilled to welcome back Donald Critchlow. He is an author. He's also a professor of history and the director for the Center for American Institutions at Arizona State University. You can learn more about his work at his website, cai.asu.edu. And so, yesterday it was really so interesting, and it kind of like a veil has been lifted of the great evil that's going on in the world, and the think tanks of men for an evil demise of population and humanity. And I liked what Father John Paul said yesterday as he was sharing just how St. Pope John Paul was really trying to speak the voice crying in the wilderness, right? I mean, he was a lone voice crying out, trying to address it and to steer it off its course, but to make us aware and to call it the culture of death. And we as a people of God need to be informed. We need to be prayerful, and this might be something, as Father John Paul said yesterday, you might want to be offering this up during your Lenten journey for this evil to disband, break up.
Yeah. Paul VI, his encyclical Humanae Vitae in the 60s, maybe 1968, was also incredibly prophetic, and just basically said, in terms of how human beings are conceived, and lay that out and what needs to take place in that, and opposing artificial contraception.
Birth control.
Yeah, and so he really took a courageous stand at that time and spoke right into this. I want to say again, it says here, our mission, the ASU Center for American Institutions, has a single nonpartisan purpose: preserving and renewing our fundamental American institutions to maintain well-ordered liberty in an exceptional nation through the fostering and renewal of foundational American institutions, including civic, religious, legal, financial, political, military, and family. So again, that's the Center for American Institutions on the campus of Arizona State University. Thank God for them and the work they're doing. We'll be right back. Plenty more to come. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. Well, our guest today is Donald Critchlow. He is a professor of history, and he is the director for the Center for American Institutions at Arizona State University. You can learn more about his great work at his website, cai.asu.edu. And I hope that you are being enriched as we are with the facts and the truth that he's telling us. So yesterday we talked about the global population, the control movement, everything that's happening. So tell our family quickly in a nutshell about the control of the global population, and then we're going to go home more to domestic.
Yes, well, at the end of World War II, as we explained yesterday, let me again thank you for inviting me back into your home.
Yes.
Privilege.
Re-invitation is always welcome. Sometimes it doesn't always happen with me, but at the end of World War II, a group of men, really in their own ways visionaries, they sought to They saw that they believed that World War II had been caused by overpopulation and the lack of land. So their solution to avoid a third world war was famine and instability globally was to reduce the population. And I think it should be said that they were visionaries. I think they were well intended. They had witnessed a terrible war, 100 million people on this earth killed, and they wanted to avoid that. But there was a kind of an arrogance and ill consequences with what was launched in their population control, because what was going to follow was a change not only in how we're going to address poverty in the world, global poverty, but also there was going to be a change within the culture itself, especially in the West, with our cultural values. And that's perhaps something we could talk more about.
Yeah.
So
Well,
they were not, I want to emphasize, they were arrogant, but they also had good intentions. And this goes to show what often happens is good intentions lead to the road to hell.
right. And they were sincere. They were just sincerely wrong. And when we do it against God's plan and God's way, you know, it's like when we rub our hands up against the wood the wrong way, a grain of the wood, we're going to get splinters. And it was in evil intent, even though they were just wrong. And here we are, now we're seeing the decrease of population here in 2025, globally, domestically, where we are. And so tell our family about the domestic movement.
Yes, well, I think what the ill consequences with both international family planning and what was going to happen on the federal level were some of the ill consequences of sterilizing women in the world, forced sterilization, as we talked about yesterday in India. But more importantly was what was going to be, in effect, an attack on the family, and the kind of culture of death that is going to begin to appear in Western culture, kind of a acceptance of abortion, and maybe even more than that was a turning away from life itself, so that people don't have as one of their major desires to fulfill God's message to replenish the earth and to create families and to raise children and get the satisfaction of raising children. So that's going to break down. We are seeing, though, I think, a revival, kind of a quiet religious revival today in reaction to what's going on in the last 50 years or 60 years. So I think we should be very optimistic about beginning to see a light of revival happening within our church and happening within the faithful.
That's an encouraging word. And I'm just wondering a bit more your premise for that, this change. You mentioned going from contraception and forced contraception to really an attack upon the family itself. There you speak about marriage, the sanctity of marriage. We see that the Supreme Court changed the definition of marriage. You can't change the reality of marriage, however you define it, but they did that. And in that definition, it's pretty clear. It's the departure of a child from the human relationship. So the definition was same thing when blacks and whites, that was illegal, and the Supreme Court decision finally said, well, it's a man, they can produce a child. So this is illicit. Just because they're different color doesn't matter. They can have a child. Now, with the new definition, the child doesn't matter. totally adult-centric. And yet you're saying, you know, you're seeing signs of a return to the natural law, and sometimes pain is a teacher, and there's been tremendous pain in this lack of clarity regarding what a human being is and only two sexes or genders versus all. Elaborate more.
Yes, when the Vatican, when the Pope, as you mentioned, released Humanae Vitae, there was a reaction within the American church as well as the European church against it because for many lay Catholics in the church, they thought artificial contraception was an advancement in technology and would allow kind of the freedom for parents to have when they would want to have children. But the message of Humanae Vitae was much more than that. Right. Not only was it talking about life, the Vatican warned that you're going to begin to see a breakdown of the family, and once the family is broken, the entire culture becomes broken. And I think that's the consequence that we've lived with for the last 50 years. So the fight is still around God's fundamental unit of the family. And in that, we need to respect and protect women. And the church has always done that. But this is where we're at today, that we need to begin to, and I think we're seeing a revival of faith, the Catholic faith, not only in the United States, but in many other countries. I was in Brazil a few years ago, and there's a real Catholic revival going on in Brazil, which is quite encouraging.
Well, you know, it is encouraging, and especially when you see the March for Life every year, as EWTN airs it every year. And there are close to 500,000 young people who are there. And there is a revival, and they're saying, we don't want your birth control. We don't want your culture of death. Right. And believe it or not, Catholics are procreating. And so we are raising up us like ourselves, because the culture of death, they're not procreating. So they're not even, you know, replacing themselves in their crazy ideas that they have and their think tanks. They may be wealthy, but their ideas, nobody's buying their ideas, nor are women buying that abortion is birth control, and abortion is women's health care, and birth control is good for women. You know, because people are saying, I've seen the consequences, I've seen the fallout. I've had hundreds of girls tell me, I hate the way I feel when I'm on birth control. I don't know who I am. And then I'm tired of being used. I'm not being loved on and adored and cherished in a relationship. I'm being used, which is what the culture of death does. And instead of knowing the dignity and value of a human person, we're just using each other. Right. And we're loving things and using people, and that's the exact opposite.
Well, let's face it, Joy, the sexual revolution of the 1960s going into the 70s was the successors to that were males, because, well, for obvious reasons. But the turn toward abortion as it occurred in the population control movement, or the population movement, created at that point quite a lot of division, quite frankly. We needn't go into, but John D. Rockefeller, who was under heavy criticism, he was, as we explained yesterday, was head of the population council, and which was keystone to a lot of other groups and foundations' involvement in family planning. Initially, he was opposed to abortion, but by 72, 73, he had come out for abortion. But he saw a reaction in the general public and also within both parties that they were not going to easily accept, the American people and their political leaders were not going to accept abortion easily. It seemed too abhorrent. And So what Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller decided, along with others, is that there needed to be a change in sexual mores. And so he began to fund, through grants, the sex education in our classrooms. He also began to promote homosexual rights. And that was to basically change our morals to make abortion more acceptable. Now, I don't want to leave your listeners or you with a view that there was a conspiracy afoot. I mean, it was not a criminal enterprise. They talked to the leaders of this movement through the Ford Foundation and many others. Did not have a secret plan, but they did have a goal of reducing the world's population and then getting the West to accept abortion. So it wasn't a conspiracy. I think they were well intended, but it was going to have disastrous consequences on our culture, as we see in the 1970s, 80s, 90s. Out-of-wedlock births go up, single mothers, abused children left behind in very tragic ways. So we're beginning to restore our culture. It's not going to be restored overnight. It's not going to be done just through the election of a good president or a few senators or House of Representatives. It's going to be, it has to be done by us, the average people, having a faith in what God is telling us is the longer destiny of this, of us as humans, and the history and its future. It's something that we don't fully know. It's a revealed truth. But we need to have faith in that truth, especially during this time of Lent.
And hope.
And hope.
Donald, we're going to hold you over for the final segment, so get your thoughts together about what you want to share in a couple of minutes, what you want to leave our viewing audience.
I thought I just left.
Okay. No, we're not letting you go this time.
Okay.
So we'll be right back. Hope
Pleasure.
that you are enjoying and being instructed, being equipped, that you might be better fit to share with your children, your grandchildren, anyone who will listen and some who might not want to listen, the truth of the natural law and the truth of divine revelation to enhance humanity. We'll be right back. Plenty more to come. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're wrapping up today's conversation with Donald Critchlow. You can learn more about his work at his website, cai.asu.edu. I strongly encourage you to go to the site and hear the great work that the center is doing on the campus of Arizona State University. If we just have like 3 minutes or so, maybe share a little bit more about how this population control has ventured into our country more fully domestically. Who are some of the key players? Are the players you've mentioned still in existence? Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, what's going on?
Yes, we still have governmental agencies involved in population control. They're also involved with economic development and in good ways, although we don't have time to discuss how a lot of the money used for agricultural development and economic development gets pilfered by corrupt elites in these countries. But there's still many people who believe that the key to solving the world's problems is to reduce the rate of population growth. Bill Gates Foundation is very involved in population control. Ted Turner, who is, a TV mogul, Turner Stations, and many others believe that this is the key to solving the world's problems. They think that reducing the world's the rate of population growth, which has been reduced, is considerably, nearly by half actually, the rate of population growth, is the panacea to the world's problems. Those people who seek panacea through just their myopic visions, if I may, turn their back on God's greater vision. And that's what our church brings to the world. And that's what we need to keep in mind, that there's people that will take on the thinking, the kind of a narcissism that they can become gods and control nature itself, and in doing that, they turn their back in effect on God's greater vision for us. That doesn't mean that we cannot be involved in changing our lives through technology and human betterment. But it does mean that when you begin to think that you can reshape the entire world as they've sought to do, it's a kind of grandiose vision in which they project themselves as God, and we know what happens when people think that they're gods and don't have a transcendent faith in something higher than themselves.
You will be like God. And what they needed to understand was, I'm already like God. I'm made in the image and likeness of God.
That's right.
Doctor, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you
this
very
has been
much.
Fantastic.
Well, good pleasure to meet you.
You did a great
Hope to have you
job.
back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I thought we were still on camera.
Thank you so much.
Put that on camera.
Okay, we got it. And so hope that you've enjoyed this show here today. Hope it has been instructive, helping to equip you to do the work of the ministry, to proclaim the gospel holistically, especially the sanctity of life, the sanctity of marriage, the sanctity of the family. Let us equip our families in this way. Let us, as Donald said, let us plant seeds. You may not even see those seeds come to fruition. They happen after you're long gone. But the Word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, joint and marrow, and opening up the desires and intentions of the heart. You're an important part of this family, EWTN family. You're never alone, and you're always at home with Jim and Joy. Bye now.